Hey folks, Mark Scroggins with Scroggins Law Group, and we are back for another episode of the Reclamation Transformation. And we have a repeat performer for the first time, Reis, joining us again. Roy, how are you?
It's good to be back.
Good to see you. So we've got a lot to talk about today,
Yeah.
with all the crap that just happened with this Allen shooting. And then we got into a discussion a little off camera that relates to it. That is, mental health,
Yeah.
and mental health can play a huge part in divorce cases. From if somebody is having mental health issues, and a lot of the time we're not talking about things like depression. There, we're talking things like somebody's bipolar and is not properly
Yeah.
medicated, or someone's got is histrionic, or any one of a number of what they'll call the triad. So if somebody's psychotic, or is a sociopath, a psychopath, those types of things, it's really, really difficult. But the ones that I think people don't understand are that depression is an anxiety, because those two usually go hand in hand,
Very close.
are a normal kind of disease that is just treated like, I've got all kinds of knee issues that go back to, playing sports and heavy lifting and all this kind of crap. And so we treat those and nobody thinks anything of
That's
it.
right.
But all of a sudden there are a lot of people that are out there that they think, God forbid you treat depression or anxiety, and really what you've got is a spiritual malady
Yeah.
of some sort.
Yeah. Well, look, let's go back to the Allen shooting, how it started.
Yeah.
The last time I saw you was Saturday night
Right.
of the Allen shooting.
Right.
I think at that point they had just captured or shot the gunman.
Right.
We were at the FC Dallas game. I was in a bit of a daze, if
Right.
you remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you were even like, hey, what's going on? And for me, none of these shootings have really affected me.
Right.
And I'm embarrassed to admit that because it always just feels like it's something on camera.
Right. Right. It's not real. It hadn't happened to you, so to speak.
It's unreal. I mean, it's almost like seeing it on a video game or a movie or just watching the news, because now we have 700 channels and you can just flip through and see anything, and it's hard to know or feel what is real.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing the Allen outlets was so real because I grew up in Allen.
Right. Didn't you used to play around with some guys right in that exact area?
Yeah. Okay. So now you want me to tell the story.
Yeah,
Okay.
tell the
Because you know
story.
the story. So when I was in high school, we actually used to go off-roading where the Allen outlets were being built.
Right.
So the Allen Police Department got really smart. They moved. We also got smart too, and we moved down the street. We were actually off-roading one night after the Plano Allen football game. I played football at Allen. Had an interception that night, by the way. Had a
Very
good game.
nice.
Had a good game.
Good. Good.
Rock and Roy came to play that night. And so we were out having fun off-roading. And the next thing I know, man, you see those lights, those red and blue lights, they're coming over the loudspeaker,
Right.
come out with your hands up. And I
Right.
was like, oh my gosh. So it was the first and only time I was almost arrested. I've never been arrested, but it was the first time that I actually had my hands up. Cuffs did not get on us. But yeah, like I think back about those times, right? I'm 40 years old now. I was 18. I grew up in Allen. When I moved there in the 1995, there was the Real Thing Catfish Cafe,
Right.
and the Mexican food restaurant and McDonald's. I mean, it was a little town. You knew everybody. You'd go get donuts on Saturday morning at Max's Donuts. Everybody would know you. You would know everybody. And so when that Allen shooting happened, it was kind of scary. And then to bring things even crazier, I don't even know if I shared this with you because we haven't really talked since that Saturday.
Right.
Was I go to church the next Sunday, and a guy pulls me to the side. I'm at Prestonwood Baptist Church in Plano, and you could tell kind of visibly shaken, and he goes, "Hey, that was a PCA family, a Prestonwood Christian Academy family that was shot," and it just hits so close to home. I have friends that they have kids that are in the victim's class. And how do you go explain to a kindergartner that, hey, somebody in your class, they're the only survivor? And I had to do that with my girls.
Right.
You've met my girls.
Right.
They've been at soccer games and things we've gone to.
Right.
So Mark, it's just been it was a weird time, and it makes me think a lot about the Allen shooting.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, having grown up there, I mean, what is the feel that you get? So I mean, because I live in Plano, so it's super close,
Yeah.
and I got to tell you, for the first time ever, I actually turned to my wife and said, it actually makes me want to consider getting a gun. And I've always been very, you know, anti, not anti like from a voting
You
perspective.
just didn't care.
I
You
didn't.
felt safe. You didn't need it.
That's right.
Like
I
I said,
always thought that, hey,
well,
I can take care of myself pretty
yeah. I
well.
always said
So,
I had two guns right here,
right,
but then you realize that, and you watch it, which is terrible. Like I went and watched it, and you realize those people were completely helpless. There was nothing they could have done. But I think the same thing, and it's like, all right, let's go get a gun. In fact, Monday I was at lunch that Monday after with some friends from our Sunday school class at church, and I was saying, hey, let's go get a gun, and one of the guys is like, hey, I'll go with you,
right.
and I was really close to just going down the street getting a gun. I got to learn all the laws, concealed carry. Can I put it in my glove compartment? Um, but yeah, I thought the same exact thing.
See, part of the problem in Texas is that, you don't need a license anymore, so you can just carry outwardly, and that's a whole nother issue. Do you really feel safer if all of a sudden you've got some sort of militia that's out there? I remember being in a Gold's Gym, and there was some yahoo that was in there with a freaking holster and a gun while he's working out. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing, man? What is this? I mean, I'm all about the
Yeah,
Constitution, right? I'm a
yeah,
lawyer. It's what I do for
yeah.
a living. I take that is near and dear to my heart. But I don't think anybody could have foreseen taking a gun to a Gold's Gym to work out. And why is that necessary?
It seems more
Explain to me how that makes it safer.
seems more dangerous that you could be doing a power clean or a workout and that thing
Falls and
falls and kills somebody.
right. And it's not because the gun does that. It's because the Yahoo who has it doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Yeah.
They're not a cop, or they're not former military who is well schooled in gun safety. All right. I'm sure not. I don't know. So it's like, if I go get a gun, I'm dangerous with
So
that kind of thing.
is there laws with when going through a divorce and guns?
So sometimes, okay, sometimes, and
Because I mean, look, if you look at I love Dateline in 48 Hours.
right,
If you look at all the murders,
right,
it's always the spouse, right? And it
right.
always, very rarely is it a knife. Usually it's a gun.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So are there laws that are specific to when you're going through a divorce? The answer is no, unless there has been a protective order. Okay. If there's a protective order, you can't own guns. You can't have them in your possession. All right. So those immediately need to be removed, or else you can get into all kinds of trouble. All right. But generally, that's not the situation that you're looking at. So the question is someone scared of the other person? And I will posit that is the person really scared? Or is this just positioning that's being done for the purposes of trying to get a protective order, or trying to get, a leg up in a child custody situation?
Yeah.
Okay. Because then, you might have someone, you might have a court order a psychological exam or a psychiatric exam of one or both of the parties, and order that, one or both parties cannot be in possession of a firearm. But remember, depending on where you are, so in Dallas, I think you might see that a little bit more, because all of our judiciary are elected Democrats. Okay. In Denton County and in Collin County, everybody that's elected is a Republican. And who is one of the biggest supporters of
Yeah.
our Republican judiciary, or all of the, I should say, and I'm making a guess here,
Yeah.
but the NRA always plays a significant role in any kind of national election. So do they get down to the Republican judiciary? I have no idea. They probably don't need to here, because it's so ingrained that that's what you've got in
Yeah.
Collin and Denton counties. But I think that most of these judges kind of walk lockstep with all of these other politicians as well.
I'd love to see a stat on divorce murders compared to these mass shootings.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it happens nearly as much as you think. It's just, the problem is, God, and I sound old in saying this, of
You
I
are.
remember when,
I've told you that before. You
and
are
I
old.
am old. That's a good point. Thank you for reminding
That's
me
why I
of
hang out
that.
with you. You make me feel young.
That's right. I make you
Because
look
I'm old.
good.
Because I'm old
I
now.
make you look.
I'm
It's
just
it's a
kidding.
sad state of affairs when you're old and I'm hanging out and I'm the older one.
Yeah.
But the real question becomes one of mental health in these things,
Yeah.
and looking at that. But it'd be interesting to find a stat about how often does that happen, because I think you talk about seeing it on 2020 or something, on
Yeah.
60 Minutes or something like that. Well, all of these have become the National Enquirer.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's all sensational journalism.
Yeah.
It's whatever is going to grab your attention.
And hold it for an hour
That's
and be
right.
able to run advertisement slots in the middle of it.
That's right.
Yeah, because if you look at it, there's a big talk around mental health. We were
That's
just
right.
talking about the difference with the shooter, which is
Right.
awful. Was there mental health involved? And my response was that's pure evil.
Right.
And we've talked spirituality. I believe that there is good and evil in this world.
Right.
And people that don't agree with me,
Right.
just look at what happened on that Saturday afternoon and tell me that's not pure evil.
Right. Yeah.
That's pure evil. The gun debate will never be able to resolve because people will have different takes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have best friends, and we'll all have been best friends, raised the same, right? A lot of ways, conservative Christians, and you'll have one that says you can never take my guns, and you'll have
Right.
others like you. It's like, look, I have no use for a gun. Why do I need a pistol or even an assault rifle?
Well,
It's crazy.
that's the big question. Okay, look, I get a pistol for self-defense.
Yeah,
I get it, because when
just
I
not
said,
just not a Gold's Gym.
yeah, exactly. I don't understand the whole reason that it's necessary to be able to, carry in public.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's bullshit. I don't
yeah,
think that makes anybody safer.
yeah.
I mean, if you start talking about you're going to have a militia, that's that's parading around the streets with an assault rifle and with a gun, is that going to make me feel, safer? No, that's going to make me feel like, who are these freaking yahoos
Yeah.
that are out there that are making it feel more dangerous, actually, than feeling safer? Because what I fully expect, what's going to happen is somebody is going to get up there and start jacking with them. And at some point, someone's going to pull a gun.
So would you feel safer with more police, with more of a presence? Like, have you ever,
Yes.
like, I traveled to
Yes.
like, I just got back from Israel in December,
Right.
and everyone told us to prepare our girls that they would see young men and women,
Right.
men and women in the Israeli armed forces, and
Right.
they would literally have machine guns on them to not be scared.
Right.
I thought it would scare my girls. In some ways, I thought it would even make me a little nervous, right?
Right.
I'm in a foreign country. I've never felt so safe in my life.
Right.
So when I look at it, like, I just came back, I had to go drop off something at field day. The kids were outside.
Right.
I see all the kids outside. My first reaction is, hope they're safe.
Right.
And I see a Plano police officer out there, and I love that. Like, I wish we could put armed police officers at every school.
I think there's
What are your thoughts on that?
well, I tend to agree. But the question is how many? Do you just put one? Do you put five?
My kids' school, like, let's do 10, and let's do, not really. I'm actually all kids, so let's put them in all of
So
them.
I think there's the question of how do you go about living without becoming captive, in
Good.
society? And I don't know the answer to that.
I don't either.
I think you need a presence, but I don't think you want somebody on every corner kind of presence. I mean, the reason that you see the Israeli army out there is because they're surrounded by all of their enemies, and it's what their history is.
That's right.
So they have learned to live with that. Now, have we learned to live with that? Do we need to learn to live with that? Are we in a completely different time and position in our history where now we need to be living under armed guard? I don't think so, but I think we need to have a presence.
Yeah.
Do we? So I think that is something. Now that gets into a whole nother issue when you start talking about how the hell are you going to pay for it? And that's where, you run into certain issues, because if you're going to do it on the budget that we currently have, what are you going to cut? And I don't have the answers to that. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just throwing out these questions. I mean, so it becomes a difficult decision. But let's go back a little bit to talk about some of the mental health
Let's talk
issues
about the mental health.
that you talked about, because I agree with you. That guy, pure freaking evil. Okay, pure freaking evil. But what I get concerned about is the situation that I mentioned a little bit ago, where someone says that, oh, well, what they're really, they didn't have the Lord, or
Yeah.
some, and there's some of these things that you can't freaking cure just based on
Well, did you see Elon Musk on the white supremacist comment this week?
I did not.
So, there's a lot of people mad about some of the Twitter feeds and some of the pictures, um, which is interesting, right? Because I kind of go both ways. It's like I'm pro gun, but then I'm also like you. It's like I don't really feel comfortable with the guy working out next to me at the gym with a gun on his hip. I don't like that
Exactly.
either.
Right.
But I can see both sides.
Right.
I'm also not for censorship in America.
Agreed.
I love the fact that you and I can sit here and talk about whatever we want to talk about. And if it affects our pocketbook or our reputation, that's fine, but we still have the right
That's right.
to talk about whatever we want.
And that's an important point, because a lot of people, I think, had misunderstood what the First Amendment right gives. It gives just that right
That's right.
to be able to say basically whatever you want, aside from yelling fire in a crowded
That's right.
movie house.
That's
Okay.
right.
There are going to be consequences, or there sure can be consequences. And people today have not realized that. They think it gives them the right to say whatever the hell they want and there can't be any consequences, which is total bullshit. That's not what the Constitution stands for. It says that you can go in and you can say these things and you can stand for this all you want. Now, it's absolutely my choice, too, to walk up and say, you're full of shit. I won't support anything that you are involved with.
That's right.
So it can affect your pocketbook all day, every day.
That's right.
And that's what it's about.
So the comment was, why were you allowing live feed things to happen? And
Right.
then he came out and said something about the shooter. Like, why would you bring up the Allen shooting victims? Again, it's weird watching a national show with Elon Musk talking about Allen. Again,
Right.
all of it's still weird to me, just because Allen is this country, sleepy little town that I grew up in,
Right.
with great high school football.
Right. Yeah.
And so he stated that maybe he wasn't a white supremacist, right? And so they said, "Are you worried about what you say?" And basically to Elon Musk, has Elon Musk ever cared?
Right.
The answer is no,
No.
and H no. He doesn't care, and he was basically just saying maybe he wasn't a white supremacist. When I start looking at that shooter, my answer is, yeah, it's pure evil.
Right.
If it's white supremacy, that's pure evil.
Right.
If there's some of these other groups, that's pure evil. But the issue that I think we run into is when people just say, hey, it's not a gun issue, it's a mental health issue. Well, when we start talking about mental health, just like you talked about your knee, something interesting happens. If all of a sudden we put that shooter in the mental health bucket, the minute that, I'll just put it on myself, the minute Roy Reis has anxiety and says that I have anxiety, I'm in the same bucket as a mass murderer.
That's right.
And so it's a really interesting discussion, and language matters. People think that language and words matter, just like identity matters.
Right.
And if you look at what everything is happening now in identity in America today,
Right.
it's all an identity issue. And how do you identify yourself? So is it identified as evil? Is it identified as a mental illness? And the answer is probably both.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that it's identified as a mental illness. Now the question is, what was he suffering from? Okay, so when you get into someone who's a sociopath or a psychopath, that's typically where you're going to find these, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Mind you, I am not an expert in that.
Yeah, we're not
area.
psychiatrists or psychologists,
But my understanding is that's where you typically find these people on the spectrum, okay? But just like, somebody can have any other disease, okay? If this guy had some other terminal disease, it's not the terminal disease that made him evil, right? It's just like if you've got, some sort of mental health illness, that doesn't necessarily make you a sociopath or a psychopath.
That's right.
Who's going to go do something crazy. That's exactly
So
right.
I think as we continue in America today, we have a mental health crisis.
We do, and it's something that needs to be talked about more because I mean, I can speak from the recovery standpoint,
Yeah,
right? I mean, because there are people in recovery that would sit there and tell you that if you take an antidepressant or if you take some anti-anxiety medication, that you're not truly sober, okay, because it impacts the way you feel. That is the biggest bunch of bullshit I have ever heard in my life.
agreed.
And that causes all kinds of problems because that keeps some people who could get sober and could live a great life from being able to live that life because they were shamed by some idiot who is uninformed and doesn't understand what mental health really is.
That's right. So talk to me about that. So, and I didn't realize this till the pre discussion. That's why we
Right.
said let's roll with this.
Right.
And we just literally flipped on the cameras.
Right.
So, is it doctors or is it other patients? Like, explain to me the shaming that goes into it. And we spoke a lot last time on shame and the role that
Right.
plays in our spirituality.
So it's not the shame that you get are other people in occasionally. And I think it's gotten a lot better. But, you know, say from 20 years ago in the recovery community or 30 years ago in the recovery community, there are those that would tell you that if you took an anti-anxiety medication or an antidepressant, that you weren't truly sober. So the shaming that was going on was happening within the community itself. It wasn't happening from doctors, okay, that are the prescribers or from psychologists who are providing therapy a lot of the time, because a lot of people will tell you that if you really want to get relief from depression and from anxiety, you need two different things. You need one, medication for it, and two, there's generally going to be a piece of talk therapy that is going to go into it for a period of time, okay, to find out kind of what the sources are, what triggers it, you know, what situations you find yourself in where it's like, okay, that really tends to hammer home this particular bullshit belief that I have that really, you know, plays into the depression or the anxiety. Okay. So, but when you have a community that is the fellowship upon which you are relying a lot in getting sober and staying sober, that's telling you that you're not really sober, well, what's to keep them from not just saying, well, screw it. Then if I'm not really sober, I might as well have a
Go
drink,
drink.
or I might as well go do a line of Coke, or I might as well do, you know, pill popping, which is the biggest deal today.
That's
And
right.
I mean, it's amazing that's the kind of thing that always amazes me. Thank God pills were not my deal because I've had, you know, so many different surgeries and have had pain is such a big problem that I've had to take care of. Thank God that pills are not what my deal are, and they're just not. But if it was, holy shit, I can't even fathom what that would have been like.
And so the reason they don't like the antidepressants is because they say you're under control of a substance still. Is that accurate?
That's right. They're saying because you're taking something that impacts the way you feel, which is just asinine because it's like what we were talking about. If you've got a sinus infection,
You take an antibiotic.
right.
Okay, so do you, I'm going to phrase this correctly. So I'm going to think. Do you think that, I'm not going to put a percentage, do you think that most people that are alcoholics
Uh-huh.
have a major underlying issue, whether it be depression or anxiety or
Oof.
something else that's going on, that they are self-medicating with alcohol or with recreational drugs? And if they were to get the proper treatment, the proper pill, and the proper counseling, where the counseling's not also just talking, but it's looking at your lifestyle, it's looking at your diet, it's looking at your exercise, it's
Sure.
looking at your sleep, and looking at it from a holistic standpoint, that we would have a lot less people with these issues that we're seeing today.
Wow. So that's a really good question and it's really loaded. And let me explain why. Because then that starts to create the assumption that there's a pill you can take that is going to cure you of alcoholism or drug addiction.
It's
And
fair.
that I don't believe that there
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I agree
Okay?
with that.
So that I don't believe that there is. Now, do I believe that people are dual addicted most of the time? Yeah, I do. That's just my belief though. Okay. Understand that I'm not supporting that
Yeah, no, we're
with
just
any
talking.
kind of, you know, studies or anything. So, you know, Have I suffered that? Yeah, I've suffered problems with depression
Yep.
and, alcohol. Okay. Those are my two deals. So with that with that, I would consider myself to be dual addicted.
Yeah.
Okay. Or to have a dual diagnosis.
Yeah.
So with most of the people that I know within the recovery community, do I see most people that suffer in that same manner that have, a depression or anxiety component? Yeah, man, there are an awful lot. Now, do I see all of those that need to be taking a pill for it? There are a ton that don't. Okay. So there's different, right? It's categories.
Yeah.
Like when we start talking about depression, you can have situational depression, you can have chronic depression that's for your lifetime. Okay. I thought, and I was diagnosed with situational depression at one time, and then I ended up being diagnosed with, a permanent basis of depression. Now,
Yeah.
how did I know that? Because every time that I would try to get off of the antidepressants, or I say try to get off, every time I got off of the antidepressants, it generally, after a period of time,
Yeah. It takes a while to get into your system.
I would have a relapse with alcohol. Okay, because the depression would get so great that
You go
I
self-medicate.
would self-medicate, and it worked for a period of about 6 hours, and then it didn't.
So your day to day,
Right.
how many people do you interact with substance abuse and mental health issues?
Oh shit, man. I don't know. Half of them. Half of them. Alcohol or drug addiction. Probably in 60%, 70% of my cases, it's an issue. It's an issue that is out there. Now, the question
Is it
becomes,
usually one spouse or is it both?
I don't know that I could
Put a percentage on that?
yeah, because I'll tell you another thing, shoes come in pairs. Ducks marry ducks.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Exactly. Crazy finds crazy. I mean,
Yeah. No, you're right.
I mean, I hate to say that, but I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't mean that in the negative
Or
connotation that
but
some people
no,
might
but
find.
I think
That,
what
oh,
you're
don't
saying,
use the term crazy.
no,
I'm triggered. Well, get a freaking life.
yeah, but no, it's a valid point. So if more people would
Right.
address their root issues,
Right.
how many less people do you see? Which is ultimately what you want. It's not like Mark Scroggins doesn't have enough business at his door, right? I mean,
That's true.
we've talked about that.
Right.
There's more than enough business. Your phone is always ringing.
Right.
It's more about where are you the best fit?
Right.
We've talked a lot about that, and
Right.
who can you help facilitate? You've
Right.
talked about the journey that people go through, and you love that journey. A lot of times, people see you as a bit of an advisor,
Well, there's a reason.
not just somebody to facilitate a transaction.
Well, I think that's true, and on two different bases. I mean, one, so when you see the lawyer license, right?
Yeah.
It says attorney and counselor at law. Okay, and I have a real belief of what the reason is behind the term counselor being
Yeah.
there, and it goes a lot into the law firm that I have created, which is I want us to very much be a concierge type of practice. So it doesn't just end at you need to file this original petition for divorce, and we need to have this temporary order hearing, and we need to get this expert, and we need to get that expert. But I'm trying to help people in what do you need? What do you need to become the better you? You're coming out of one of the five hardest things that anybody can go through, right? A divorce is right up there with death of a spouse or death of a child or death of some other loved one.
Well, in some ways, I would think it's worse because there's
That
death.
person never goes away.
Well, and that, and also with death, it's you can be mad at God,
Right.
which that doesn't really work, by the way.
Only for a period.
Only
yeah.
for a period. And that's, by the way, I'm a Christian,
Right.
right? Love God, love people is kind of my motto.
Right.
There's been times that I've been angry with God and had to wrestle with my faith. And I think
Of course.
that's a natural thing to wrestle with one's faith. And I believe that a faith that can't be tested is a faith that can't be trusted. So it's natural to kind of have that I'm wrestling with my faith. That's okay, by the way. And anybody in the spirituality, Christian community, whatever you want to call them, Mark, that would shame somebody. It's almost like the pill things. It's like, well, how dare you say
Well,
that?
I remember I talked to an Episcopalian priest
Yeah.
one time, and I grew up Episcopalian.
Yeah.
Okay. But this was, I don't know, within the last 20 years.
Which, by the way, next podcast, I'm going to watch the story on Hillsong tonight and the whole
Okay.
Carl Lentz getting
Uh-huh.
divorced and relationships. We need
Right.
to watch that and come back, and we need to do a show on that.
I think absolutely. Because faith is
It's
faith is all about my life today.
Yeah. Okay. So I interrupted you. You heard Episcopal.
Right. But I talked to an Episcopalian priest and I told him, and I was really struggling with my faith, That's another problem that I've had is, my faith has been up and down. And I told him, I said, look, I find myself in a situation where I don't understand why these things like the gunmen in Allen happen or in Uvalde or all this other crazy shit.
How do you shoot a 3-year-old?
Yeah. I don't understand
How do you
that.
take out a whole family? Like, what's wrong with you?
And then I look at different things that people close to me have been subjected to, or I have been subjected to, and it all stems around, feeling wronged, so to speak, okay, and not understanding, right? And so I found myself, I said, look, I'm cussing God. And he said, you know what? He's big enough. He can handle that. And it was just like, oh, okay, because I thought I was damning myself, to hell for eternity because I was cussing him, and he's like, as long as you're still talking, that's a good thing. And I was just kind of like, it kind of, it was like that dog reaction.
I did the same thing.
He's like, huh? I did, because that's something I never expected to hear was as long as I'm cussing him, I'm still talking to him, and that's a good thing. He's like, just make sure that the talking never stops. And I was like, holy shit, that's really profound. Yeah, that's not what I was expecting to hear.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, and I agree with that, right? But this life is a journey.
Yeah.
This is not an easy, there's a lot of questions, a lot of things we don't have. Life is difficult. Life is challenging. So kind of going back to what we were talking about with the mental health.
Right.
Most people that walk in your office and see you, would they be better served first going to a counselor? I mean, you bring in counselors
all the time,
right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's part of it. It's not just like, hey, cool, let me go file a paperwork at the courthouse and process this thing.
Right.
Talk to me about what it looks like when people come in.
Yeah. So, I mean, most of the time, by the time people are getting to me, they have already run the traps.
They've already run those traps.
Most of the time. Not always.
And if not, you advise them, right?
Yes.
Because
I will advise anybody that, look, if you want to try to save your marriage, you should absolutely do that.
Yeah.
Okay. And that means, have you tried counseling? Is your spouse and here's the problem.
It's usually,
is your spouse willing to go to counseling? And usually it's, we've already done that and it didn't work. It made it apparent that it's not going to do that. Or, I mean, and remember, a lot of the stuff that I get called on is when it's a big nasty fight and people are having to do something right then, right there, kind of deal. Although there are times that I get those calls and it's like, God, I would love to save my marriage, but I just don't think it's going to work and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, look, if you haven't exhausted all of the options that you have and you want to try to save your marriage, you should absolutely do that within certain confines. And that doesn't mean go and sign a postnuptial agreement that gives him or her freaking everything. Don't do that. But it does mean, go to counseling. What can you do? Are you looking at yourself? Are there changes that you can make? And that number 2, you're willing to make.
So what does counselor mean to you?
What does counselor mean to me? You mean in the terms of my license?
What is his attorney?
Kind of like what we just talked about, where I'm offering, it's more kind of life coach, if you think about that kind of thing. It's more kind of a life coach kind of thing about what can you do that is going to make your life better and allow you to be the person that you want to be, so it's really kind of, what's your vision? What's the vision of you that you see coming out of this? What I always want to try to do in helping people go through any family law litigation is let them go through it with as much grace and dignity as possible. That doesn't mean don't take the gloves off. Okay. That absolutely doesn't mean that, because God knows there is nobody that loves a street fight more than me.
More than Mark Scroggins.
That's right. Okay?
I'm aware of that.
I love that. Okay?
I know. We've been in negotiations. I see that.
But the point is,
in a good way.
There's a time. There's a time and a place for that. It's just like, every tool shouldn't be a hammer.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes you need to go in with tweezers. Sometimes you need to go in with a scalpel, and sometimes you need to go in with a machete. It depends on what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So, so what is my view is I want to try to make sure that somebody can walk through with as much dignity and grace as they possibly can, being true to themselves. And so that's a real thing as you go through this and you can start. I view it as like, there's always another layer of the onion. And so you're peeling things back. And so as you can peel back these predetermined ideas that you had, and understanding that the rules of the game have changed. It's not you and that spouse together forever anymore that are creating, this life together. Now it's about you creating a life for you and protecting your children and a
Yeah.
life for your children that you can be proud of, that gives them the advantages that you can give them.
Yeah.
Okay. So once I know what does that look like, then we can go about planning that for the future. And so that's just part of getting them through the litigation is just part of that. Okay. What do you need next steps? So is it we're getting you into some counseling now, and then once this is done, we're getting you into some post-divorce counseling, and I'm trying to hook you up with different experts in different fields. Yeah, I do that all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have relationships with lots of different people. So if I've got somebody that is a high net worth divorce person, which I deal with a lot of those,
Hmm.
and they are looking at things in the commercial real estate area, well, I'm sending them to you,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean,
It's no different than you sending them to the psychiatrist or the counselor. I
that's
heard
right.
I heard a counselor tell me something one time that I absolutely loved that I've got to share. He said, so many times in life we're looking at what we want to change. We should really just flip that or transition that. It should be
Right.
what culture are you trying to create?
Right.
Because changing behavior is tough. And I think maybe that's when you get into the mental health or the addiction issues, some of that behavior can be modified and adjusted, but some of that will always be there. And you either learn to work with it
Right. Yeah.
or you don't, right?
Right. Well, and so much of it's really the personal journey. God, and now I'm sounding, let's light some incense.
Yeah,
but
that's good.
but the personal
The journey.
journey is really important because instead of so here's I'm going to use another corny saying, when you're pointing the finger at someone
You got
else,
three back at you.
exactly, and that's really important to realize that it takes two to tango. So look at what can you change about yourself even going through this process that makes you a better human being.
Well, one of the things I like about you, Mark, is that so many times people will look at things or call things. Look, you're very transparent about your life.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, it's life is messy, life is ugly, life is hard,
Right.
but you're also a person that has experienced a lot of beauty
Oh my
and a lot of
God.
greatness.
Yeah.
Your daughter is about to get married. That's going to be a beautiful ceremony,
Right.
right? You've got a great relationship with Whitney. Like people, what I mean? People. So there is good and bad, and it's how do you navigate that life through
Well,
it? It's
that's
tough.
that's the other thing. It's like, some of the things that I thought at the time were the absolute worst possible thing that could have ever happened to me have turned out to be the best thing that could have ever happened to me because it put me on a different path.
Yeah,
And it's where I needed to be. It's like there's this book called the Prayer of Jabez. Okay. And it talks about how we're pruned by God at
yeah,
different times and how difficult that is, where you're almost screaming out, God, really?
yeah.
There's not much more of this I can take, and it's the pruning to allow that beautiful bloom to come later. Because I'll be the first to tell you, if you would have ever told me that I would be living the life that I am living today, I'd have told you that you were out of your mind,
Yeah.
that there was no way that that is possibly true. But it's crazy. It's true. I mean, I'm living a life that I just can't believe today,
Yeah.
and a big part of that is being able to help people walk through these
Yeah.
these difficult times.
And all the great relationships you've accumulated along the way.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of crazy. The next time that we do this, we need to talk about faith and the journeys and how we went down that road because
Yeah.
it's always great to have you
Well,
here.
I'm a little ADD, so these topics go everywhere, but it's fun, and you do have a beautiful life, and good luck in the coming weeks as your daughter's getting married, and
Well,
It's a
I
good time.
appreciate that. Yeah, it's going to be a good time, and she's found the best guy. I mean, Vince
He's
is just
he sounds like it.
he's an awesome guy, and he deals well with Whitney, who's got a big personality. If only
Like her dad probably.
if only I could figure out where the
Where
hell
that
that
kind of
came
comes
from.
from.
Right. So
Yeah.
so Roy, thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here today.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
y'all for joining
Thank you.
us on another episode of the Reclamation Transformation. And remember, change starts with you. So don't forget to leave your mark.